Modern Horizons. It brings with it a whopping 45 reprints, and it's just what the professor ordered. Listed here are the top 5 reprints for Modern of note from Horizons, starting with number 5, Marsh Flats. While only a modest $40 each, Marsh Flats is a welcome reprint for many Modern mana bases. And that, of course, brings us to our number 4 reprint, Arid Mesa, which had climbed up to $44 each. But thankfully, reprinted in Modern Horizons is number 3. It's a reprint that makes me misty-eyed, and that's Misty Rainforest, which was up to a beastly $66. Followed, of course, by our number 2 reprint, Verdant Catacombs at $71 each, oh my. And our number 1 pick, you guessed it, Scalding Tarn. Such a needed reprint that the card is at a whopping $98 each. Modern Horizons is going to mean one thing and one thing only: more modern players, more modern excitement, and more modern decks needing those critical components for their mana bases. What a great thing then that they've been reprinted here. And grab them while you can, because mark my words, Modern Horizons is going to mean their prices are going nowhere but up. All joking aside, these 45 reprints into Modern have me super excited, because they are just that, reprints into Modern. Never before Modern legal, but existing cards. No, we didn't get Fetch Lands or Karn, but we are getting 45 cards that existed in Legacy, now brought into Modern. And presented here are my list of what I feel are the 5 that are most relevant and likely to impact the Modern format. But first, I have an honorable mention, and I must confess it's a bit of a personal pick for me, because it is that Live the Dream deck that I think has been made a reality with this reprinting. It's still a long shot to victory, I know. So again, it's just an honorable mention, but I want to talk to you a little bit about Altar of Dementia and the deck that I think it's going to go in, Blue-Black Mill. Altar of Dementia is an artifact for 2 generic mana. Sacrifice a creature. Target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of their library into their graveyard. Blue-Black Mill has always existed on the fringes of Modern. It occasionally even shows up on the tournament radar, a small blip, but nonetheless, with our recent reprints of once expensive cards like Glimpse the Unthinkable, and now Altar of Dementia, brewers are keeping their eyes open. The idea is to get a creature such as Consuming Aberration into play, whose power will be extremely high due to the giant graveyard our opponent will have. If Aberration lingers, they'll get milled further and further as spells are cast in that game. But with Altar, we sacrifice the Aberration and hopefully mill out our opponent immediately. Altar itself has been previously expensive due to Commander players. If nothing else, Altar of Dementia is a needed financial reprint, but with the cult following that the mill archetype has, I think it is going to find its way into more than a few lists. Moving on is another card I feared would only be played by me in Commander, but now it calls to me from the great format of Modern as a fantastic way to bring us through the Breach decks, back from the brink, and that card is Elladas Call. Elladas Call is a green and a white for an instant. Search your library for a creature card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Low cost and instant speed, this gives us both criteria we need for Through the Breach, which I think will benefit from the Naya colors. Previously, the constant drawback of Through the Breach decks was often the variance that a resolved breach would sometimes resolve with nothing for you to actually cheat into play. Elladas Call, however, can tutor up everything from spicy new cards like the Razbor to classics like Emrakul. Now, we have had a card with this effect previously, Time of Need, and I will acknowledge that this did not see play in Through the Breach decks to begin with. But I think that the main difference here is that Time of Need was at sorcery speed, and being an instant makes all the difference in the world. I could also see some Selesnya decks sideboarding this for a fast way to tutor up specific answers in a pinch. So even if this is low on our list of reprints, it is still bringing with it a powerful effect and a strict upgrade. Fantastic addition to the format. Next is a particularly old card that Wizards dug up to reprint in Modern, and anytime you dig something like this up, Reanimator fans are going to go wild for it. And that card is Unearthed. Unearthed is a single black for a sorcery that reads, return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It also has cycling 2, meaning for 2 generic, you can discard this card to draw a card. So no, you're not going to reanimate Grizzlebrand on turn 2 with this. But there's great fun to be had at the 3 CMC level. Death's Shadow, Tarmogoyf, Ooze, in fact most of Jun's playbook, as these are cards oft removed early game to slow those decks down, well, they all can now be easily brought back for a mere 1 black mana. We can also get a little crazy with cards like Fulminator Mage that sacrifice itself to destroy a land, and, well, then just unearth it to destroy a land again. Is that double dipping? I can't tell. Heck, creative players may even utilize discard spells like Thoughtseize and Inquisition for a turn 1 discard on themselves, and then turn 2 unearthing. There's a lot of fun possibilities, and it's a classic card with a powerful presence, and finally now in Modern. So as we hit number 3 on our list, we see a legacy staple now reprinted into Modern legality, and one that, like many of them, first came from a Commander Precon deck. The card is causing a storm of ideas for its role in or against Storm decks in general, and that card is Flusterstorm. Ah, Flusterstorm, a single blue for an instant. Counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 1. And it has Storm. So when you cast this spell, copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. Flusterstorm hoses Storm decks. Flusterstorm makes Storm decks even stronger and safer and better protected. Maybe one, maybe both, but the only thing that is not a maybe is that this card is now a recurring and regular part of the Modern format. There's no reason not to run Flusterstorm in nearly every place that the spell would previously be. This is a counterspell that keeps huge stacks under control, responding to our opponents, responding to our spells with finesse. The card's price has been fluctuating in the $20 to $30 range since the announcement of its inclusion in Modern Horizons. And the fact that this is now a card run in Legacy and Commander and Modern means it's always going to have a solid price to it. Remember to pick yours up as a buy a box promo at your local game store, because Flusterstorm is going to be with us for a long time. All right, just as it was with my list of best cards for Modern that were not reprints, the number 2 slot is far more interesting to me than the number 1, even though I will acknowledge that the number 1 slot is overwhelmingly more powerful and probably overwhelmingly going to see more play. But I can't help myself. Here, number 2 may in fact bring about a brand new Modern deck, or at the very least take center stage when adopted into an existing one, and that card for the number 2 most relevant Modern Horizons reprint is Nether Spirit. Nether Spirit is 1 generic, a black, and another black for a creature, Spirit. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Nether Spirit is the only creature card in your graveyard, you may return Nether Spirit to the battlefield. The card I think of with Nether Spirit is an evil one. The deck I think of when I think of Nether Spirit is a wicked and cruel one. And in both instances, that name is Smallpox. Pox, a legacy classic, never quite materialized in Modern, largely due to Wizards of the Coast's strange contemporary view of what is and is not fun. Is Nether Spirit the missing piece to finally bring a smaller version of Legacy Pox into Modern? I really do think so. This is a card that opens up deck building space in general throughout the format, but I feel it's significantly goes in a pox build where we are just destroying and eliminating everything our opponent tries to put on the board, and oftentimes everything we put on the board. Why is Nether Spirit the card for that deck? Well, just because it's so hard to kill. It's not going to cost much to put this in your deck. You're only running one copy after all, and while not entirely a win con in and of itself, it is resistant to removal, both yours and your opponent's. So if you Liliana of the Veil to discard a card, or Smallpox and Damnation throughout the game, Nether Spirit is going to keep coming back, and eventually it'll help pave the way to victory. It's also a really nice chump blocker for early games where you still haven't stabilized and your opponent's creatures are swinging in. It then puts pressure on their life total later in the game. As I mentioned, the only drawback is that most lists are only going to want to run one, so again, this isn't in itself a high pressure card, but it can and will kill people eventually. And if you need further proof of this card's power, just look again to Legacy where it is run. True or false, the card that I've selected as the #1 reprint from Modern Horizons will come of no surprise. Declared by most pro players and card designers as the best card advantage spell that has now ever been printed into Modern, you'll need to decide for yourself if this card is true or false, and that card is Fact or Fiction. Fact or Fiction is 3 generic and a blue for an instant. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put one pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Without a doubt, this card tests your skill. It tests too the skill of your opponent as well. In some ways, casting Fact or Fiction is like casting a mini-game within the larger game at hand. In terms of decks, I think many will run this, but I am excited with all the blue we've seen recently, from Kefnet to the unbanning of Jace to Archmage's Charm, that mono blue control might actually turn into a modern thing. Aside from in Tron, mono blue has never really been a runaway powerhouse or tier 1 in Modern, usually relying instead to splash white, and even then coming and going with the meta tide. Adding Fact or Fiction to our collection is epic, and with other strong blue cards like Force of Negation and Fluster Storm in Modern, Fact or Fiction not only is going to see play, but is also going to bring about solid blue builds. But now I want to hear from you. Of these 45 reprints, which ones do you think are going to see the most modern play and why? Were there any cards that were not reprinted that you wish had been reprinted into Modern? Let me know and be sure to tell me why. And I hope very much this video has been of some help to you. You can help me out by remembering to like, share, subscribe, or just by posting that message. And remember, Modern Horizons is hitting stores, so whether you are buying a few loose boosters or card sleeves, when it is possible, try and spend that money where you spend time playing this great game. That's not at Target and Walmart. It's certainly not on Amazon. It's at your local game store when it is possible and when it is reasonable. And when you do so, you're supporting your Magic community. So thank you. And this program was made possible thanks to a sponsorship from Card Kingdom, as well as the Patreon support of viewers such as you. So thank you.